Welcome to StartHer, the podcast dedicated to sharing stories that ignite female entrepreneurs into action. I'm your host, Elizabeth Goede, and I'm here to fan the flame of your entrepreneurial spirit. Each week, we bring to you the inspiring stories of women trailblazers from around the world who have sparked change in their industries, powered their ideas into thriving businesses, and pioneered their way to success. So whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a startup enthusiast, or a seasoned business leader, join us as we delve into the journeys of these incredible women whose tales will surely ignite a spark in each one of us. Laurie Hardie is a true trendsetter in the world of radio and podcasting. With over 35 years of experience as a Seattle radio personality on Warm 106.9 and more than 3,000 podcast episodes under her belt, Laurie is on a mission to make the podcast and Zoom world a safer and more inclusive space for people with trauma. As a woman entrepreneur, Laurie understands the challenges of navigating the business world and is passionate about helping other women, especially those in their 50s and beyond, to share their wisdom and leave a lasting legacy. With her unique blend and expertise in social sciences and broadcasting, Laurie has discovered a way for podcasters, Zoom leaders, and trainers to retain more of their audience by eliminating just 2 words from their vocabulary. In addition to her professional accomplishments, Laurie is an avid gardener, a horse lover, and lifelong learner who enjoys listening to podcasts and audiobooks. Her passion for empowering women and creating inclusive content is truly inspiring, and we're thrilled to have her here to share her insights with all of you. So get ready to be inspired, motivated, and equipped with the tools you need to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit. Welcome to the show, Laurie. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
So, Laurie, when we think about women in business, and we think about the long career that you've had, there are a couple things that stood out to me about your background. One of them is the fact that you've been in broadcasting for a long time, and I want to talk about that because I can imagine when you got into broadcasting, this was not a heavily female-dominated industry. So, can you talk a little bit about what it was like to have your first job in broadcasting?
It's so funny when I get asked that question because the 2 things that come to mind are, one, that everything was vinyl. So when we would play a song, we'd have to roll the record back so that it didn't go when it started up. It was so hands-on. And because everything was one song, if you had to go to the bathroom, you had to pick Stairway to Heaven or I think maybe American Pie. And we had, because this was a male industry, there's always a jock bathroom. So
right.
The main people can't use it. It's only because if you got to go, you got to go, and you can't wait in line if you got a 3-minute song. And I remember the thing that stood out to me is those bathrooms wherever I worked were so gross because they were man bathrooms. And it didn't really register until later in life when I started at the station I'm at now, Warm 106.9, because we have so many women now in the industry and it's so lovely. And the bathrooms have flowers. And it was such a stark revelation of how far we've come. And one day there was a curling iron in the bathroom and I was like, we have made it. These bathrooms are for women too.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. And so I guess my question is this: did you study broadcasting in school? Is that how you actually ended up in it, or was there some other inspiration for you?
When I was a little girl, I had a transistor radio and I listened. Oh, I would put my covers over my head and I would listen, and they were always male jocks. So it never occurred to me that I could do that. We had Sunshine Sherry's in Seattle. So they were the ones that drove around in the station's VW bug or whatever and gave away prizes. And that didn't appeal to me. But then FM radio came on and there was a country station with a female jock and her name was Charlie Parker. I don't even know if she's still alive. But all of a sudden it occurred to me wow, I could be a DJ. And from then on, and I was so shy, people would make fun of me. In fact, when I would say I'm going to broadcast school, I'd like whisper it. And I remember one time I lived on an island in the Pacific Northwest, and I came home for the weekend and was working, in our small town. If you came home for the weekend, you worked at the store. And I remember some of the employees going, "Are you a DJ yet?" And I was like, actually, yeah. And they were, so shocked because I think they just thought, oh, she thinks she's going to be a DJ. But so that was my inspiration. And then as I was in the industry, I did take a break when I had my family because I lived on an island. But when I went to go back, I thought there is no way this is a young person's business. And it did take a lot. In fact, at one point, this is one of my favorite stories, if it's okay to tell you. I
Please.
was working with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I had the biggest program actually in the US. And all of the ladies at the Family Resource Center were so awesome, and they supported me, and they knew I wanted to get back in radio. And I had been trying, and that day we couldn't really record from home. I had to go buy this expensive mic, and it was just really difficult. But I had been in the top 3 for a Seattle station, and I didn't get it. So I went to their resource center in the afternoon, and I called them and I go, "I'm coming, but don't ask me about the job because I didn't get it, and I'll probably cry, and I don't want to cry in front of the kids. So can we talk about it later? But I just want you to know I didn't get it." So I get to the little Family Resource Center where all the bigs and littles are meeting. And when I open the door, there's this red, school carpet. It's paper, construction paper, and leaves and glitter. And I thought, I am so wrapped up in what I want to do that I've forgotten somebody's birthday. So I ran to the back room and I said, "Oh my gosh, whose birthday is it?" And they all jumped up and they go, "Surprise, it's a pity party." They had a
Oh,
pity party for me. And you know what, Elizabeth? If that hadn't happened, I don't think I would have continued trying. Sometimes we try so hard and we just keep getting a no. I would say I try so hard and I kept getting a no, and I was ready to give up. But because of that, I tried one more time, and that's how I ended up at Metro Traffic, which was not what I wanted. But what it did is it put me on so many stations in Seattle that everybody knew my name.
Laurie, I love that story so much. The Boys and Girls Club is sort of a special place in my heart as well. I actually had a opportunity to put in a bunch of community gardens in partnership with Boys and Girls Clubs across the country, and that was what that organization does is truly amazing. And there are really incredible opportunities that it's given to people that you may not even know came up through the Boys and Girls Club. So not that this is an advertisement for them, but certainly I love that story so much to know that it played a part and a role in your sort of career. And so you work in broadcast. You've worked in a long time. You've sort of seen all the good, bad, and the transition that's happened. I mean, certainly, talking about going from vinyl. Just out of curiosity, this is just purely my curiosity. So it started with vinyl. Did it go to cassette after that, or did it stay vinyl till it went? What was the transition there?
That's a great question. Then it went to the 8-track. Remember the fun 8-tracks?
8-track. Yeah.
So what we had would be an 8-track, but you would only have one element on each cart. Like
Okay.
an 8-track would have 8 songs,
Right,
but the 8-track would just have a commercial, and then it would have a song. And so then we were just pushing a button, next.
Got
But
it.
then the stations that went to cassette were usually the smaller stations that couldn't afford big equipment. Because when
Sure.
I went back to the island I lived on, I worked at their little station and they had cassettes, and it was pretty frustrating because they're just not as manipulative. And then from there, when I did get back in, everything was computerized, which no fax. When I left, it was fax, and it was 8-tracks tracks. And then when I came back, everything was computerized, and it almost felt like I was cheating, like just pushing buttons. And it took a while to kind of get over that, to be like, okay, it's okay. I still have to think about what I'm saying. A lot of people say, I should work in radio. I talk a lot. And I always say, if you talk a lot, your boss will be pounding on the door, coming in, going, tighten it up.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun to hear sort of the behind the scenes here. And, it's funny when we were just briefly talking about cassette, I was thinking about, my life is I'm going to really narrow this down, but when I was little, the way that you could get recorded information right was to record off the radio. And so in a way you became your own DJ as you were racing across when you heard a song you wanted to record onto the tape. Anyway, I was getting that flash in my mind of that moment.
Yeah, when you
Okay,
made your
so
mixtapes.
yeah, exactly. The mixtapes, do you know I still have some of those mixtapes that my friends made me, and they still bring back such great memories. Okay, so you work in radio, you go through all these transitions of going from a boys club to actually more female dominated, which is super exciting to hear. And then sort of podcasting comes about. So how did you actually get interested in podcasting? How did that transition happen?
I'm not going to lie to you. I resisted podcasting. In fact, a friend and I did a coaching radio show, and she had a cousin that worked for Disney. And she said, "Hey, can we meet with you?" And he consulted us. And I don't remember, but it feels like it was maybe 2010 or around then. And he said, "Podcasting is the wave of the future. Do that." And I was like, "No, I want to be on the radio." Like maybe I was snobbish. I don't know. But we did a show for a year, and her and I just met, had coffee the other day, and we said if we would have podcast, we never would have stopped.
Right.
Because there's not the financial thing. There's not all the stuff that we had to do. We had to go to the station, all of that. So finally, when the station I'm at now kind of started their digital platform and they wanted to have podcasts, I ran into the promotion office and I said, "I want to do a podcast." And he said, "Well, what would you do it on?" And I said, "Well, coaching." And he's like, "Well, what would you call it?" And I said, "Enough." And he's like, "Okay, make one and I'll see what I think." And so I just did a little, it's 3 to 5 minutes every week. And that one's got I just did one yesterday, 263 episodes now. And then some friends at work, we all did a pop culture, but people keep getting fired in radio. If you know radio,
Right.
we always
Yeah.
joke, if you don't get fired, you're not really in. And so every time people get fired, we pull in a new person. And finally, there's 3 of us. Anna, who is a Filipino mommy with her children are African American. And then Claire, who is a Jewish lesbian woman who was on morning with Fitz. If you've ever heard of Fitz, he's national in the morning. And then me, a single white single mom. And when she got fired because they flipped the station, we went to the boss and said, "We're keeping her." And they were like, "Okay." So I don't recommend having a lot of podcasts. I recommend having one with 3 pillars. If you have 3 things you want to talk about, just do it under one umbrella. But because of the nature of it, so that gave me exposure to the short and sweet, the maybe longer, more informative, and then also the interview types, because I do the public affairs. And as you know, interviewing can be tough. Sometimes people will talk, sometimes they won't. I had this biologist and he was loved octopus. He wrote a book on it. And I knew he'd had him in his house. He'd had aquariums. And I go, "Well, what was your favorite octopus?" He goes, "All of them." And I said, "Well, what do you love about octopuses?" He goes, "Everything." And I said, "Look, we got 26 minutes here. You got to give me more." So I learned that, the art of interviewing, as you know, it is an art and it's a skill. And the more we do it, the better we get at it. And so I got to learn all the varieties. And then when I started my own podcast on my own platform, I kind of combined all of those.
So all excellent points. I love the idea of the 3 pillars and keeping it together. It's interesting. I think that the more that, and this is just my opinion, I don't have any statistical data against this, but I do find that, and there certainly has been a lot of reports published on this, but the more that we have sort of this electronic stimulation, right, where we don't really get a break, the more that I think it's hard for us to hone in and focus in one area on one thing. Instead, we feel like, we're all like visionaries that can do a million things, and yet we do nothing because we're so distracted by doing everything. But you found a very particular niche that you are interested in supporting, specifically in your podcasting journey and your experience as a broadcaster. I couldn't think of someone more qualified to do this, but you're really reaching out and helping women over the age of 50. So can you talk about like where you decided you want to support those women, and particularly like what you're seeing when working with them?
What I love about this is when we are an entrepreneur, who are we helping? Somebody, what, 3 years behind us? Isn't that kind of we can look at the big gurus who are 20 years ahead of us. But when we want to help people with what we've been through, we're looking, and I work a lot with women in recovery. And so they get clean and sober, they start, get a job, go to school, then they reach down and help the next person. And when I looked at retirement, I'm 65. I was looking at retirement and I went, that's not going to happen for me. And the truth is, what's true for us is usually true for other people. And what I realized is these women in their 50s have so much to offer. They have so many experiences, so much to share, and they want to, but they don't know how, because here's the 3 things I hear. One is, do you know what the first one is? You probably heard it. I hate my voice. I hate my voice. Get over it. We all do. We're not used to hearing our voice. So get over that. The next thing is, I'm not tech savvy. And what I say is yet, because you can podcast from your phone. There's an app I use in radio. It's free. All you do is you download it, you calibrate it, which is just one push, and then you record. So you can do this. If you want to learn, I have free online editing tools. I have this cute little mic that's $59. We use it in radio. But the thing is, if you don't want to learn it, you've inevitably got a younger person in your life that can do it like that. Right. Or there's Fiverr, which you can go on Fiverr and hire anyone they can break up with your boyfriend for you if you want. So it is so easy. And if we can think differently and let go of all those I can't and go, but what if? Imagine you're feeling prompted to tell your story. You have somebody that's praying for an answer, but they're not getting it because you're not sharing it. And all it takes is pushing record. All it takes is pushing record and sharing your wisdom. And some women go, I don't know what to say. Well, in my class, I have one I call it podpreneur blueprint. You write down, the first step is 18 to 24 things you want people to know. So it can be about your business, raising kids, cooking, whatever is your thing. And then all you do is you ask a question, you tell a story. If you're the type that wants to teach, do a little teaching, ask the question again, done. And once you start doing it, as you know, because you're doing so many interviews, sometimes 3 a day, you get in a groove and it becomes a habit and you don't even think about it. Suddenly you're doing it without even really thinking. And it is so doable. If I could get you to trust me to believe that and just push record, in 1 year, you'll have 52 episodes. And guess what? You can transcribe them. Now you've got your book.
Okay. Yes. All of it. Yes. So I've been working in artificial intelligence for about 2 years. And up until about a year and a half ago, I hadn't really realized how much women were getting left behind. When you work in an industry for a long time and you're used to being around men, right? I'm sure you had the same thing in radio, is that you don't it's almost like you become accustomed to the problem.
Yes.
Because it's like you become benign to it because it's like you see it all the time. And one of the biggest pieces that I love about what you just said is, and in addition to your book, and in addition to that, you also then have a blog. In addition to that, you also have social media content. In addition to that, because artificial intelligence can help us be faster with the things we're already doing. And Laurie, I love it. I love it. I love that you are supporting this, supporting women that are sometimes thinking like, I'm going to start on the downward plateau, right? Like I've been climbing in my career. And now, it's like, now I'm going to coast to the end. And instead it's like, why? Now you have all the wisdom. Now you've actually built up all the content that you didn't have when you were 20 years old. So tell me more about, one thing that we sort of teased in your intro was about the 2 words. And is that really the 2 phrases that you just gave us, which is, I don't like the sound of my voice. And what was the second? Was about I don't understand. Yeah, I'm not a techie.
So those are the 2 things that hold people back from podcasting. But what I noticed during COVID, when we all went to Zoom, I was leaving Zoom calls. I was hitting next on podcasts, and I was going, and I'm a single woman. I live alone. My families live in other states. So during COVID, I went to the radio station every day, but there was nobody there. I'd sit down at my which every day I sit down in that chair, and I give gratitude for the amazing job I have. But the lights would go off, automatic lights, because no one's walking around. So it was very lonely. And what happened was, because I work with people in recovery, I have a degree in social services, and because I work in radio, what I recognized was people were saying 2 words that to them felt inclusive. To them, they felt like they were giving everyone a big hug. But in reality, the people that were alone and people with trauma, do you know that 40% of our audience has ACEs? Have you heard of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences? If you Google it online, there's a little test to see if you have come from childhood abuse, or trauma, which we respond differently. So when people are saying these 2 words, most people don't care, but the people with trauma, what they hear, I'm invisible. And I'll tell you a really easy way. Have you ever done Toastmasters?
I have not done Toastmasters.
Okay,
no.
So if you do Toastmasters, they don't like you to say and if you do, they click. They have this clicker. And then for me, I work in radio. I've worked really hard not saying but when they start clicking, I just keep saying So it's really hard to stop a habit. But the 2 words are everybody. Hey, everybody. And you guys. Hey, you guys need to know. It is so offensive. And you said it earlier. When we talk to everybody, we talk to nobody. You said a version of that, because that's number 1 in marketing. But then they don't take it to, they build their avatar and they give it a name and they talk to that one avatar when they're advertising. But then they go and open their mic and they say everybody. They forget they're talking to one because they see 100. And the first thing we learned in radio was we talked to one person. So we would put up on our mic a picture of whoever we were talking to that day. We never said you guys or everybody. And what happens with DJs, some people that aren't older don't realize people were falling in love with DJs. You know why? Because they thought they were talking just to them. And musicians do this too. Musicians sing and talk in a way that you believe they are talking to you. And that is what we want. We want people to feel seen and heard. And when we say you guys, we just group them into a group. And you know what else we've done? We've stepped up a step above them, because we've said, you guys are down here. I'm going to teach you up here. And it's such a simple fix. And remember that TED Talk of the woman who said, take a power pose before you speak? Same thing. Before you open your mic, before you open your Zoom, get in your mind that one person that you are talking to. So when I'm on the radio, I don't say, hey, you guys, do you want to go to this concert? I go, hey, you want to go see Maroon 5, don't you? Well, text the word. If somebody says yes, then I've done my job, because they think I'm talking to them. And it's such a subtle shift. But if we do that, 40% of our audience are not going to go away feeling like I did. Like, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? How come I do all the same things and I don't get the same results?
Right.
And also I feel like I'm not part of your crowd.
Right. Yeah. I love that advice. Such good advice and such quick action that you can take from that, which I also love. So when we think about this, you are still working in radio. You still have your radio show. You have several podcasts that you're still in, which is how you're racking up those monstrous numbers. Tell Tell me a little bit more about the coaching side of what it is that you're doing, because you certainly have a business called Coach Laurie. Talk to me about where the inspiration for starting that business came from.
So in 1998, I wanted to be a counselor, and I had a friend who was an adjunct counselor at a college, and she said, "No, you don't." And I was so mad at her. But then my neighbor came down with a newspaper and an article about coaching, and this woman, what Fran Fisher, was going to be in Seattle talking about coaching. And I went and I fell in love with it because it's what I did anyway. It was listening. And so I became a coach, but back in the day, people thought it was really weird and new age. So I had a hard time getting traction. We didn't have online. We didn't have any of those things. But the thing about coaching is when somebody wants to do a podcast or a YouTube channel, the first thing is they get excited. And then the first thing they start to say to themselves is, well, who's going to listen? And so
Right.
really our self-worth, and I think as an older generation of women, I look at these new millennials and they are doing amazing things. And I'm thinking, how did they get so on top of it so early? Well, they had more available to them than we did. And so some of the women still get really stuck in our worthiness, in our self-worth. And I always say it doesn't matter who will listen. If we have
Right.
a message, we shout it from the rooftop, and whoever is supposed to hear it will hear it. And so the coaching comes in helping them keep the momentum, keep the consistency, because we've got those terrible voices in our head that will shut us down. I call them the gremlins. And then
Yeah.
also there when if you listen to when I listen to podcasts, people that ramble a lot before they start, like you got right to the point. The whole thing in marketing is give them what they want and then tell them what they need. So let's get to the point. And then if we want to chat and have a I love you, you love me, we're best friends now, we can do that at the end and people can go, okay, I've got what I need. I'm going to move on. But what happens is when they learn to know, like, and trust us because we honor their time by getting to the point and we speak to them as though they're the only ones, then they know, like, and trust us. Guess what? They want to buy our program. They want to coach with us because we've shown them who we are by caring about who they are.
Yeah, I love all of that, and certainly the guidance that you can give from the career that you've had because of, I mean, just having a background in, in counseling, for lack of a better way to describe it, and then you think about all of the things that you've learned in your career. I mean, you combine those two things together, it completely makes sense. One of the other things that we did sort of mentioned in your intro, but we haven't really talked about is the privacy in Zoom. Tell me more about that.
So the privacy of
Well, so it was about security, I think, in Zoom. Um,
about being a Zoom leader and
yeah, yeah, being
yeah,
a Zoom leader. I
yeah.
apologize for that confusion.
No, that's okay. So, well, two things come to mind. One is that, when people are using, hey, everybody, hey, you guys, what happens is when people tell us stories. So, for instance, when you lose weight and then you feel so great and then you do this. Well, what happens is when we don't own our story, when we don't say, when I lost weight and I got those results and I felt that way, what happens is people feel judged. So when we and I still correct myself, it's something that it seems like everybody does. And so owning our story and saying, when I did this, this happened, then what happens is people can say, oh, I'm so happy for you. Whether it applies to me or not, I get to decide. But what happened when I was on these Zooms, people would say, like I was being these masterminds, and they'd say, if you do this system, you get these results, and you do this. And I would go, I did that system. I did not get those results. I mean, how many times with weight loss do people not because their physique, their body doesn't respond? So we walk away feeling like a failure. And so often I feel like so many people are walking away. They don't even recognize what happened. Like for me, I recognize, oh, it's the words, it's the language. But people are walking away going, what is wrong with me? And they're feeling less than. And if we would change our story, use the I instead of you. And then if we open it up to sharing, like I was on this big mastermind and they opened it up for what have you got from this, and that was where this guy is like, if you do this, you get that, and everyone's like, oh, you're amazing, and I'm going, I want to leave this room right now. And so if we teach our people, so my coach Eileen Wilder, she'll open up, which she's so well known now, she's hardly accessible, but she'll open up and people want to tell her, and she goes, just can you just say my question is. So if we teach people, if they start to say, well, when you say, could you change that to when I, because then people won't be offended, they can be happy for you, and they might go, I'm going to do that too. So it's just a simple shift of making people feel welcome versus making them feel judged. And is that on you? No, it's how we take it, but we can talk in a language that's better so everyone can benefit, because what we have to offer is so brilliant. And if we use this good language, more people will stay, more people will get blessed and get what they need, stick around, and they will grow and benefit from it instead of going away feeling less than.
Laurie, I mean, just so many nuggets on our conversation today that I don't know how people can't just want to take action. I'm loving all of this. So a lot of times when we have businesses, there are things that happen that we think, oh gosh, when I started this business, if I had known XYZ, maybe I wouldn't have done it, but I was too naive to know. What is like that one sort of struggle point or difficulty that you've been through when having your business that has happened?
So many things have happened. I started not online, then I started a blog, then I became a single mom, like all the things that have happened. But I was listening to a mentor just today on a podcast, and she's a finance money kind of person. And she said, well, her guest, she said, when we met, they were in yoga training. They were training to be yoga teachers. And I went, that is it. We evolve as we go. And I'd kind of like to throw this back to you, Elizabeth, because this is kind of your area. But so for instance, if you start a podcast and you go, this isn't what I want, rather than start a new one, just evolve and let your people evolve with you. And I think that an older generation, we're kind of used to doing the same thing all the time. And we forget that we can just evolve into whatever's next. I interviewed a dentist yesterday. And do you know what she does now? She's a death doula. She's a death doula. She lost her career because her fingers, she got something happened and she lost her drill fingers. She lost her son to suicide. And then shortly after, her husband passed away of a heart attack, and she decided to write a book on grief, and she has become a death doula. Look at her. She evolved. She was a dentist and she was the president of all the dental organizations. And it just has made me realize, especially this week, we evolve. That's what we do. And we can go, oh no, I can't do this. Or we can go, you know what? I'm going to keep going with the same audience. Some people may stay along. Some people may go, not for me, but we get to continue to go in our brilliance of whatever our next is. And I'm curious what you would say to that.
Oh gosh, I mean, working with entrepreneurs, startups, and frankly, even just business owners, the power's in the pivot, right? The power's in the pivot. It's the opportunities that you get when you realize that maybe the direction you thought was the right direction is not the direction that actually helps someone else. And I think that that's the hardest part, is that a lot of business owners start their business because it's the thing that they're passionate about, and it's solving their problem, their own personal problem.
Yeah.
Which, please start that business, go in that direction, but listen to your customers and listen to the people who say no, and understand why they're saying no, and figure out if you're then opening up an opportunity that then allows you to pivot into the next thing. Like, I mean, I mean, as much grief as the former dentist woman had, by her sort of leaning into these really terribly tragic experiences. I mean, you don't become a dentist because it's just like something fun to do, right? Like you've got to want to do that. And then you lose your ability. It's not like you even chose to leave that profession. And then, all these other traumas. And then the next thing she knows, she's literally pivoted 6 different ways into a completely different career. How incredible, right? Such an awesome experience.
Yeah.
So a couple other questions, Laurie, if you don't mind. What do you think has been the biggest surprise in having your coaching business and in working with this women in recovery in their sort of later in life? What's been the biggest surprise in working with that demographic for you?
For me, when I teach a class, for instance, I had this very shy young lady. And of course, people in recovery often are struggling with shame.
Sure.
They maybe haven't got there yet. They've lost their kids. Maybe they've got some court things to work out. I'll never forget being in a class with a woman who I met her after recovery. So I knew her on the other side. And so we were talking to a room full of people just coming out off of drugs. And she said, well, when I was in jail, and I'm looking at her going, what? Who are you? So there's that kind of shame. So this girl was really shy. And I say, push record. That's my mantra. Just do it. Push record. And honestly, most people don't. But if they push record and they're in my class, I will edit it and I will put beautiful music on it, under it, and I will send it back. And they cry. Either they won't listen for a long time, like a day, or they'll just cry because they can't believe how good they sound. Well, this little shy girl did this powerful podcast. I mean, it was about 10 minutes long, and she talked about her involvement with CPS. And I played it for the class because I knew nobody would believe that was her. And the power that comes from opening our mouth, even if we don't believe we're worthy, even if we have shame about who we are, being vulnerable, sharing our story, it is so powerful. And when we share our story, we don't have to be like, oh, and they did this to me and they did that. We can be like, I went through the system. There were some challenges. So we can tell it in a way that can be empowering rather than dumping, but it's still our story. And it surprises me over and over when people open that mic, send me their stuff, and I get the privilege of producing it and sending it back. And they're like, I can actually do this. I can actually do this.
Yeah. What an incredible privilege to be able to sort of see that transformation. It's almost like, going from like a cocoon into a butterfly. It's an incredible power, I think, to be able to hear your voice. So I mean, I feel like you might have already given this to me, but I'm going to ask anyway. So I ask all of my guests, what's one word or a short phrase that you would give as inspiration for another woman who's looking to start or grow her business? What would be that one word or short phrase?
Well, I have two, and they're kind of the same. But have you heard of W. Clement Stone?
Yes.
He worked with Dale Carnegie, and he wrote books. And he was was he a realtor? And he was watching people that were successful versus people that weren't. And he noticed one thing that they did. They did it. Just do it. The wealthy people, they took action. And so he started saying to himself, do it now. And he lived in a high rise. So he would say, do it now 100 times by the time he got down. And then he taught his whole staff, and they became the highest selling company. I think they were in New York. And so those 3 words, do it now. So I started saying that as often as I could while I was driving. And I've evolved it into push record, because when we do it, it's so easy. I have people that will say, I want to do a podcast. Let me tell you a story. And if they're a really close friend, I listen to the story. But if not, I go, you know what? I don't want you to tell me your story, because if you tell it to me, you will feel like you told it and you will not push record. So I'd rather have you push record and send it to me. So do it now or push record. What have you got to lose? What have you got to lose? There is no such thing as failure. There's a thing as pivot. I have tried so many things and gone, oh, that's not really, I started crocheting octopuses because I'm obsessed with Cy Montgomery, who wrote The Secret Life of Octopus and then The Soul of an Octopus. And I got to interview her because she did the National Graphic book for the Octopus series. And so I started crocheting octopus. My first ones were horrible, but I just kept doing it. Now they're really cute, right? Do it now. Just do it. What have you got to lose? If you do a terrible one, try it again. And this is how we learn how to talk better, how to include people. And once we start doing it all the time, it becomes no big deal. And then we'll be like, what was I so afraid of?
Yeah.
Do it now. Push record.
It's sort of like the people who peak in their performance early in life is because they didn't have enough competition or failure to teach them the adversity of how they move to the next level. So I actually think you learn more, and it's better if you're not perfect the first time, because otherwise you don't have the learning style to be able to keep making it better. So the very last question for you today, Laurie, is how do people find you? So if they heard today, they're like, listen, I'm inspired. I want to do it now. I want to push record. I want to start my podcast. What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
The best way to find me is www.coachlaurie.com. And you can get my podcast class. You can do it yourself, or I'd probably be scheduling another live class, which is fun because that's where we interact and there's more coaching in the summer. And but that's the best way to find me. If you're in Seattle, Warm 106.9. If you're in Seattle, you just sang that jingle because everybody's heard of Warm.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And I just know that there were so many good learnings that came even just from our conversation today, that I really do hope that people push record and they just do it now. So Laurie, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you and your background and all of the wonderful insights that you've been able to share with everyone here today. And I want to thank all of our listeners who have joined us as well in listening to the SparkStarter podcast. It's been a pleasure bringing you the uniquely inspiring stories that ignite female entrepreneurs into action. I've been your host, Elizabeth Goede, and on behalf of all the awe-inspiring women entrepreneurs out there, I encourage you to not only dream big, but to ignite those dreams into action. Remember, every spark can lead to an extraordinary fire. So keep the spark alive for today, tomorrow, and the vibrant future beyond. Don't forget to subscribe to never miss our spark. Until next time, stay ignited. Thanks everyone thank you all for joining us today. And Laurie, thank you so much. And we'll just give a second for anybody who's joined us live today if they have any questions for Laurie. And Laurie, were there any things, the one thing that I didn't ask you was there anything else that we didn't talk about today that you did want to share? I feel like we covered a lot of topics, but I didn't ask you that question.
So it's been a while ago, but I wrote a book called Did Not See That Coming, Hope for the Single Parent. And that's kind of where my coaching career, where I put all of my coaching in. It's not really a parenting book, but it's a book about when you become a single parent, you can't do it all. You can't be a perfectionist. And so it's just kind of coaching people through what they can let go of and how to survive. When I was a single parent, there was not much out there available. And so that's why I started my blog and then I wrote the book. But had I been able to podcast in that time, oh my goodness, I think it would have been such an amazing support. We tried to do a little community support, which was amazing. But so that book also is available on the www. You got to say that, or there's so many Coach Laurie's actually since I've become one. So that's the coaching book on Did Not See That Coming. My little bio thing says, after 14 years of marriage and 3 kids, my husband left me for David. Remember, this was 30 years ago. And not only that, he took my best tiara and cemented my status as a single mom.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely am going to have to track that book down now. Is it only possible to get that off of your website, or is it also available like through Amazon?
It should be possible on Amazon. We're having a little issue. For the business side, they want me to download my driver's license, and then when I do, they don't like it. So we're working on that little glitch right now.
Okay,
So
so the
weird.
best direction is to just send everybody right to the website.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions today, Laurie, but I just want to thank you again, and I look forward to following along on your path and your journey. And we'll have to have you back on after you hit another milestone in number of podcasts recorded, I think.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.